Hey everyone, the $14,000 refund that I got a week or two back got duplicated in the traditional financial system, which I thought was just a literal ridiculous joke. And I wanted to tell you the story to understand how groundbreaking Bitcoin is, because that would never happen in Bitcoin, and just how sort of antiquated and ridiculous riding around in the horse and buggy of the traditional financial system is. Okay, so here's what happened. I had made a loan a year or two back on something for $14,000. At some point I was going to get that money back. I didn't know when. Suddenly, boom, out of the blue it shows up. And so I tell the person who calls me and said the check came in to go deposit it. And without thinking, I told them to deposit it at Trustmark, because I thought it doesn't matter what bank it is in, I'm going to suck it right out of that account and buy Bitcoin with it immediately. Well, I had forgotten that Trustmark about a year ago had disabled my ability to link cryptocurrency platforms using the automatic Plaid integration. So all of the mobile apps and consumer financial websites and all of that all use Plaid, P-L-A-I-D, and that is the integration they use to the traditional financial system to let you move money back and forth. But I forgot that Trustmark had disabled the Plaid integration for reasons I don't know, and when I call their helpline, they can't tell me, and they say it should work, and it doesn't, and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, I did not think about that, so I told the person who called me to deposit the check in Trustmark, and I would just pull it out of that account I had forgotten that I couldn't. So anyway, the money goes into Trustmark. So as soon as I try to pull it into to buy Bitcoin, I am reminded that the Plaid integration doesn't work, and therefore the money is stuck. So I think, well, the logical thing to do is to move that money over to my Wells Fargo account, which definitely works just fine with Plaid. That's how I do most of my buying, or in rare occasions selling if I need to make a big purchase of Bitcoin with my Wells Fargo account. So I go in the Wells Fargo account and I link it to my Trustmark account, which works fine. It looks like it's going to work. Okay. So then I tell it to pull $14,000 from my Trustmark account into my Wells Fargo account. It says it will. I complete it. And then it says, hey, it looks like it will be successful. Your money will arrive in 4 days. Because this was the Friday before Memorial Day. So if you initiate it on a Friday, it doesn't arrive on Saturday or Sunday or Monday. You got to wait till Tuesday, which that's the first most ridiculous thing about the traditional financial system, is how slow it moves. So I want to move money between two banks that I control, that I own, that have the exact same name on the account, and literally it takes 4 days to move money. So as soon as it told me it was going to take 4 days, I decided I was not willing to wait 4 days. And so I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I wonder if I can link River, because River allows you to link to a bank account with just the routing number and the account number. So I'll do that. I'll link River instead of Coinbase Advanced, which is what I was planning to use. I will link River to my Trustmark account, and I will suck the money out of my Trustmark account that way, because I can't suck it to Coinbase, because Coinbase does not allow you to link an account with the routing number and account number. You have to actually log into the account from the interface. You can't just link it by routing number and account number. So I linked River, and I bought $14,000 of Bitcoin on River, and it went through, and the Bitcoin showed up in my account, and all was good. Now, at this point, my $14,000 has been duplicated, because Wells Fargo shows that I have an extra $14,000 in that account that it says will, be available to me in 4 days, but it showed up in the account right away as available balance. Like, I can use it, I can write checks, I could have bought Bitcoin with it a second time. Anyway, so Wells Fargo, right after I initiated the transfer, showed up that the $14,000 was available. But over here on River, they show that the same $14,000 is also available to buy Bitcoin, which I did immediately. Okay, so the question is, who has the $14,000? Either Trustmark gave it to River for the Bitcoin that I bought, or Trustmark gave it to Wells Fargo for the transfer that I initiated. Now, I went 5 days not knowing which was which. I did not know if I was going to get a message from River saying, hey, your transfer actually failed and we're reversing the transaction. which I thought was unlikely because I had already bought Bitcoin with it. Although most cryptocurrency platforms do not allow you to move the Bitcoin off of them immediately for that reason. They have to get final confirmation from your bank that the transfer actually settled, and settlement in the traditional financial system takes anywhere from days to weeks or even months. So for a transaction like that, it would typically be days. So River is not going to let me move that Bitcoin off of their platform until they get final confirmation that the transaction settled with Trustmark, which is intended to catch things like this where it's duplicated in multiple places. But the fact that it even can be duplicated in multiple places shows you how ridiculous the traditional financial system is, that they can't even, that it takes them 5 days to figure out where my money is. And that in that 5 days, I could have went and bought 2 different things with the exact same money, which is called a double spend. And I'll walk you through how Bitcoin prevents that. Okay, so I wasn't sure which of those was going to fail. I thought, because I had initiated the transfer on Wells Fargo first, that Wells Fargo should have gotten to the money first, and therefore River should have come back and said, hey, it failed. But actually 5 days later, the reverse happened. The transaction on River went through, even though it was initiated second, and I got a notice from Wells Fargo saying, hey, your $14,000 transfer actually failed, and we have updated your account balance to no longer reflect that $14,000. Now, in that time, I actually thought about, because Wells Fargo is linked to Coinbase, I thought about buying $14,000 a second time with the exact same money, just to see what would happen. I knew it would get reversed somehow. Either it would get reversed on Coinbase or reversed on River, but I wasn't sure if that was against the terms of service or somehow illegal, and I didn't want to get in trouble. But I thought about doing it. I thought, you know what, it would be fun to actually buy Bitcoin with the exact same $14,000 twice, and then just see what happens, and try to move both of those $14,000 transactions into cold storage, where it can't be reversed, because once it's moved to BitKey, it's not a reversible transaction. Now, for that reason, I am certain that neither Coinbase or River, I'm certain that both of them would not have allowed me to remove it from their platform until they got final confirmation from Trustmark that the money had indeed transferred. So it's not like I had a real shot at duplicating the transaction, but I thought about trying to see how far I could go with it and just see what happens. Like, what happens if you suck the same money out of the, one account 2 different ways, buy Bitcoin with it, and try to, download it to your BitKey off of both platforms separately. I'm sure it would not have let me, because, the traditional banking system has checks in that. It may take 5 days, but they eventually will get around to reversing it. But I was just curious what would happen. Okay. So ultimately, I got the notice from Wells Fargo saying, hey, the transaction failed. We're adjusting your account balance. And because I had not actually done anything with that money in my Wells Fargo account, obviously there was no harm done. It was just my Wells Fargo account showed a artificially high $14,000 extra balance in it for 5 days. Now, I keep my bank account's balances extremely low, basically just high enough so that I don't bounce a check if I have to write a physical paper check to a babysitter or something like that, if I have a babysitter or something that does not take Bitcoin. But I keep my bank account balances low because I don't want to have fiat currency. I want to own as much Bitcoin as possible, not pieces of paper that the government prints out of thin air. So that is the story of the duplicated $14,000. Now, what does Bitcoin do in the Bitcoin ecosystem, the Bitcoin monetary system, the system with Bitcoin as money? What does it do in that situation? Well, it's called a double spend, and the entire genius of the invention of Bitcoin was the ability to solve that problem in a decentralized way. Because in this case, you have to go to a central authority like the Federal Reserve, which is the U.S. central bank, at some point and say, okay, who actually owns what? Where is the money? Or you have to go to Trustmark and say, okay, Trustmark, who actually did you give the money to? Both of these people are showing that you gave it to them, but who actually got it? Because they're both showing that they both received it. So anyway, so in a decentralized system with no single entity in control, the question is, how do you do that? And that was solved with the blockchain. The blockchain is the immutable, 100% certain, absolute record of truth of every Bitcoin transaction that has ever happened in all of history. And the entire chain is audited and secured by the Bitcoin miners with a new block created every 10 minutes. And in that new block, it validates, secures, and audits every prior block, and then stamps on top of it a set of new transactions that are effectively set in stone. So if you think about it, it's like cement drying, right? So when you pour fresh cement, you can sort of draw your initials in it for a few minutes or whatever. But if you got some 10-minute quick drying cement, every 10 minutes, that cement is going to dry absolutely irrevocably or irreversibly hard. And you're going to know the absolute record of truth. So in the Bitcoin blockchain, with the the invention of the Bitcoin blockchain, it solved the double spend problem because the Bitcoin blockchain only ever has one record of who owns what. Now, technically, it's slightly more complicated than that. I will not go into the, every finer technical nuance just for the sake of simplicity of this video. But the genius of it in simplified terms is that there's only one record of truth. It is the Bitcoin blockchain, and the Bitcoin blockchain does not lie. So as a result of that, I know with absolute certainty who owns what Bitcoin. If I transfer Bitcoin to two different people, the same Bitcoin to two different people, the blockchain is only going to show one of those people, and it's going to be whoever I transferred it to first. So you don't have these situations where for 5 days, two different recipients think that they both got $14,000 and nobody knows for sure. And I could have, for example, I could have written a $14,000 check to buy a used car. And I think it would have cleared, or at least the Wells Fargo would have said, yeah, the money is here. So I could have bought a used car. I could have bought two different used cars with the same $14,000. And at some point, somebody's going to end up shorted because they don't actually have the money. Trustmark actually didn't give the money to Wells Fargo and, in this case, River Financial, River, which is a cryptocurrency exchange. But again, the way the traditional financial system is set up, the delay in settlement, the delay of knowing with absolute certainty where the money is, creates these weird and awkward abilities to double spend. Now, again, they have lots of checks and balances, and that's why when you deposit a check at a bank, they typically put a 7-day hold on it, and that's because they're trying to wait to make sure you didn't deposit an identical check at a different bank for the same money. So, that is why they do what they do. But with the Bitcoin blockchain, it avoids all of that. You don't have to have all of these ridiculous 5-day, settlement because the Bitcoin blockchain only has one record of truth. And that was the genius. There was a bunch of genius, sort of developments with Bitcoin. One of them was decentralized money. The absolute certainty that there will only be 21 million, even with no single entity or single country or single anything in charge. The way the Bitcoin blockchain works, and the way the Bitcoin nodes and the Bitcoin miners work, to absolute guarantee with absolute certainty that there will only be 21 million Bitcoin was probably the biggest genius invention of Bitcoin. Second to that was the ability to have an absolute record of truth with the blockchain on who owns what, and which avoids double spends, the efforts by people to spend the same money in two different places, which again is a very hard problem to solve because in the case of electronic currency, again, if I'm trying to spend money in Thailand and I'm trying to spend money in the United States, if the money is electronic, then it's really hard to figure out, wait, which one happened first? Am I spending the same money in two different places, hoping that neither party on each side will figure out that the money they got is not the real, is not the real money that will clear? And again, Bitcoin solves that with its genius of the creation of the Bitcoin blockchain. So anyway, instead of taking days or weeks or months to settle transactions, Bitcoin can be transferred instantly anywhere in the world in seconds, and the entire blockchain is audited, secured, and stamped in permanent, cement every 10 minutes when a new block is generated, which means even for billion-dollar transactions, the recommendation even for moving billions of dollars around. So let's assume somebody's buying, I don't know, an oil field, something insanely expensive with a transfer between, sovereign nation states, and it's ridiculously expensive, and it only, that transfer can only happen once, and it's completely irrevocable, as in once you surrender control of whatever it is, that it absolutely positively, there's no way to get it back. Even in that situation, the most conservative people would say, okay, if you want extra security on the Bitcoin blockchain, wait for 6 blocks. That's the magic number. Wait for 6 blocks. Even if you're settling billions and billions and billions of dollars and you just want to be super, super sure about it, wait an hour. If you want to be, 99.99999% sure, wait 10 minutes and just make sure that the next block has the transactions in it, and a block can never spend the same Bitcoin twice. So when you transfer Bitcoin and you see it, it says confirmed. That's the word. When it is confirmed, that means it's been included in a block by one of the miners, which gives you almost complete virtual certainty. But if you want to wait 6 confirmations, which is 1 hour, 6 10-minute time frames, then that is effectively the transaction is buried under such a thick layer of impenetrable, unalterable, irreversible cement that you can settle transactions even in the billions of dollars with settlement times of an hour. So literally you could show up for a multi-billion-dollar transaction to transfer ownership of an oil field. You start the transaction with Bitcoin and you sit down for a cup of coffee and a chat. And at the end of an hour, the transaction is buried 6 transactions, 6 confirmations deep in the blockchain. And you can get up and walk away knowing that you can, hand over the keys to a multi-billion-dollar oil field or whatever. And there's absolutely no way that is going to get reversed in some way. So in the traditional financial system, you can't do that. If you try to use gold, it's going to take a huge amount of time and energy to assay the gold to make sure it actually is gold, that there's not actually tungsten inside the gold bars. So gold is really hard to settle. US dollars are also really hard to settle because, again, it takes days or weeks, or in some cases months, to have absolute certainty that a transaction has happened, that it's irreversible, that it hasn't been double spent and all of that, just like my $14,000. So bottom line with all of this is every time I interact with the traditional financial system, even if it's trying to just get money out of it to buy Bitcoin, I run into this stupid ridiculousness of how insane it is that $14,000 can appear in 2 places at the same time for 5 solid days before I find out which one of them actually got it. And it reminds me of the genius of Bitcoin, where that can never happen because due to the genius of the blockchain and the immutable, irrefutable, always reconciled ledger of who owns what, you can have absolute certainty. And the settlement time of Bitcoin is with settlement for anything but the largest transactions happening in 10 minutes, and even the largest transactions of billions or tens of billions of dollars taking at most an hour if you want to make sure it's buried at least 6 blocks deep in the blockchain, which just gives you extra assurances. Anyway, the whole thing of Bitcoin is genius. If we lived in a entirely Bitcoin world, which we will someday, then the refund I got would have been in the form of Bitcoin, whatever that was, 0.15 Bitcoin, or I don't know, whatever it was. Let's call it 0.15. It's whatever $14,000 was when Bitcoin was $109,000. So, 14 109ths, which is, I don't know, more than 10%, but less than 15%, whatever that is. It would have just been that much Bitcoin, and I would have gotten the refund in the form of Bitcoin. It would have cleared and settled in 10 minutes. And there would not have been any of this ambiguity as to who owns what and where is the money and can I spend it. And additionally, when you transfer Bitcoin around on platforms, you don't have to wait for settlement. There's no 7, 9, 10-day waiting period like US dollars, because if you transfer Bitcoin in, they know within 10 minutes that you absolutely own it because otherwise the blockchain would reflect that you don't. And if you transfer it out, they know within 10 minutes that you absolutely no longer have ownership of that Bitcoin because it went somewhere else. And everybody always knows the record of truth because everybody in the entire world that uses Bitcoin is looking at the Bitcoin blockchain, and there's only one of those. And all the computers on the Bitcoin network, which includes more than 100,000 nodes, all synchronized to that one version of truth and will reject anything that is not that version of truth. And that is how they're programmed. So anyway, Bitcoin's genius. And it's only a matter of time. It's slowly taking over the world. Obviously, there are ups and downs on the way up, but directionally, it is always eventually going up because Bitcoin is such incredibly superior technology to anything else that exists in the world, as money, as currency, as everything else, that it's only a matter of time before it takes over everything. So have a great day, everyone, and I'm here for anything you need. Thanks.